Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we will be fighting our sibling in a steampunk fantasy world with Arcane Season 2, and then looking for our mother in bombed-out London in Steve McQueen's Blitz. Lots of family conflict in this episode. But before all...
Happy Christmas!
Happy Christmas, everyone. Yes, it's the season of family conflict.
Family conflict.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And that is the closest we're going to Christmas, as we're not...
That is how this episode is festive, honest.
As we are not reviewing any festive content this year. But we will be discussing family drama and high fantasy. But before all of that, Nick, do you have anything to recommend to our listeners?
Well, I'm going to try and make things a little festive, with the heavy emphasis on a little, but I have been watching something which, just based on the title, you might think was some sort of Christmas special. Yes, this is Baby Reindeer, the Netflix series that was pretty popular and pretty successful earlier this year. You may think this stinks of Nick trying to catch up on a few notable shows before writing his end-of-year TV chart, and you'd be right, that is what's happening. So yes, this is Baby Reindeer. This is a 7-episode drama limited series on Netflix about an aspiring comedian called Donnie who finds himself the victim of a stalking campaign by a woman who he meets in the pub where he works for his day job. And this escalates over the course of the show. We find out some dark secrets from Donnie's past, and yeah, it becomes a bit more complicated than the basic premise. It's one of these things where you hear the basic premise and think, oh wow, in 2024, okay, buddy boiler drama in 2024. But as we get into the show, it soon turns out to be a bit more complicated than that. It's a weird combination of sort of Peep Show-esque comedy and a serious dramatic edge. It's like Peep Show if we really got into the nitty-gritty of why Mark and Jez are like that. You really get into the dark trauma behind it in a way that is, a lot of the time, not actually that funny.
Yeah.
But there is still quite a lot of high-quality cringe comedy. So there we go. It mostly handles the issue of presenting, yes, a mentally ill woman stalking a man by making it clear that the man is just as, if not more, fucked up than her, and often, as a result, acts like a bit of a wanker. So yeah, it's a very interesting, well-written, complicated drama. I gather it's somewhat partially based on a real experience by the writer and star Richard Gadd. I think it's based on a play called Baby Reindeer that he did. Although I gather that in turn has now ended up in legal proceedings between him and some of the people who may or may not be depicted. So that's fun and something I will not be commenting much on during this review. But Baby Reindeer itself, yes, it's good, it's effective, it does successfully dig this sort of weird mental illness hole deeper as it goes along in a way that's quite compelling.
So does it live up to the hype? Because when it came out, it was widely tipped, generated a lot of think pieces, a lot of water cooler discussion. But yeah, is it all gas and no trousers? Or yeah, do you think it was, worthy of its place as probably one of the most talked about shows of the year?
Yeah, no, it's really good. It's a lot more sort of personal and intense than I expected in some ways. I don't know, I was going to say autobiographical, but again, I guess it's hard to comment on exactly how true it is or isn't. But certainly it's a lot more sincere and honest than, or at least sincere and honest seeming, than I kind of expected going into it. As you say, you go into it expecting a sort of stalking drama, and it mostly becomes always more about what the stalking forces him to confront in himself, which, yeah, is at times quite difficult to watch, but is very well dramatised and at times funny. There's a very sharp sort of downward curve of laughs as the show goes along. Like, towards the beginning, you actually get this general Peep Show vibe quite a lot. It does seem a lot like a sort of a slightly darker cringe comedy in a sort of Peep Show vein. And as we, again, get deeper and deeper into the issues behind it, it becomes a bit less funny, or at least you have to really go dark to get those lols.
It does sound like an interesting tone, definitely my sort of tone. Yeah, and I guess there have been some, notable dramas that kind of balance both kind of character drama, but also with some generally funny bits, usually exploring dark themes. I'm thinking of, films such as 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, or I, Tonya, things like that they have dark comedy, they have general moments of darkness, and they have character drama, and they manage to balance the tone so that the comedy doesn't distract from the darker moments and the more painful character bits, but also the sort of serious tone of the character drama doesn't make the comedy seem out of place or flat. So it's a really hard tone to get right, but I find it really impressive when people do get that tone right, partly because it can so easily fail and kind of end up in a sort of looking like you're trying to be an edgelord provocateur, being like, lol, we're making jokes about inappropriate topics. But if you can land the tone right, it can really work.
Yeah, a lot of the comedy tone here, it's not really, very, wacky, very upbeat. It's quite squalid comedy. There's a lot of jokes in this show, if you can call them jokes, comedy beats anyway, where the trajectory is basically, oh, this might be alright. Oh no, it's shit. There's a lot of sort of the rug pull or the ground dropping out from under you in that, yeah, he thinks he's found some respite, or he thinks things might start going well now, and then it turns out, no, things are still rubbish. Or then he reveals something that we didn't know from his past, which has been quite nicely concealed in the early sections, which turns out to mess everything up. It's very reveal-orientated comedy. It's very, again, a dark laugh, a sort of laugh of weary recognition.
Yeah.
There really aren't many, wacky, exaggerated characters here. It's not a Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah, I guess that, again, works well with the tone they have. And it does sound like a well-structured show. They're using kind of the premise or the setup, what it's sold as a way to explore, characters and kind of dig into them. We've seen other things, use a sort of a premise or a dynamic as a way to kind of explore a rich character in their lives, which can be, very engrossing if you find the character interesting, maybe not likable, but certainly interesting, and kind of they feel three-dimensional real people, so it's like you're looking into actually someone's life.
It's interesting because a lot of the time when, writers, comedians and so on do these sort of shows, I think they often feel the need to transpose whatever experience they want to write about onto someone who has a more relatable job than being an aspiring comedian. But no, this show it's not hyper-focused on the details of being an aspiring comedian, but it is very much, the day-to-day of his life. There's a sequence where he goes to try and put a show on at Edinburgh Festival. There's a running bit throughout the series of him competing in this comedy tournament thing. So yeah, they're definitely going into, the details of that as the sort of real-life backdrop, which is, as someone who vaguely hangs around with arty people, I found quite interesting.
Yeah, it's relatable, I suppose, if you know the world they're exploring. And I guess it's based on a real life thing, or is it based on a play that's based on real life?
It's based on a play which is, to some degree, based on something that happened to him, I think, or allegedly happened to him.
Yeah, so I guess they've kept the details as much the same as possible. So yeah, whereas they could have changed him to being a different profession to make him more relatable, I guess they wanted to stay true to reality as it's based on a true story.
That may or may not be what's now causing him mild legal trouble, who knows. But yeah, it comes across very sincere and autobiographical. Obviously, there's some pretty traumatic revelations in this, and if all these things did actually happen to Richard Gadd, then my heart goes out to him. That's rough. But
yeah, oh dear. But it's sold as very much as based on a true story. It's got this sense of authenticity, and as you say, there aren't these kind of Coen Brothers-esque, larger than life, exaggerated characters. The characters are sort of believable. The situations seem every day if he's working in a pub, for example, things like that. So I think part of the appeal of it has been this kind of, here's a true story, or at least something that you can believe is a true story.
Yeah, and there's also, the plausibility of the stalking itself. There's a lot of, these details of how this person could sort of worm their way into your life, and it doesn't involve this woman who's stalking him having, supernatural powers. It just happens that she's just sort of always there, always lurking, and every so often he makes a slip up or does something knowingly stupid, which lets her back in when he could have got rid of her and stuff. It's a very realistic seeming, at least. It has the ring of truth in its depiction of stalking, and that in turn just makes it at times a bigger bummer.
Yeah. Well, it's likely to come up on some of the best lists of film and TV of the year. Well, it's the time when people write those, so I guess best lists of TV of the year. By the time this episode comes out, we'll probably be pretty much in the thick of wrap-ups. Maybe a little before, actually. They usually drop after Christmas, but it's definitely the time when people are stroking their beards and thinking about what should be regarded as the best stuff of 2024. I can imagine this will be on quite a few lists.
Certainly, I'll be growing out my beard and then stroking it for that very reason between the next two podcast episodes, yes. So yeah, look forward to that, guys. Sadly, no visuals on this podcast. Alistair, what kind of vaguely festive things have you been consuming?
Well, it's not very festive, but it is on TV right now, I suppose, so it's current, and so is Christmas, is current. Christmas is nothing if not happening right now. Yeah, I've been watching The Day of the Jackal, which is a thriller that's on now in the UK, and it's based on a film and obviously a book before that. And it's a really good, tense cat and mouse thriller. This is a modern update. It's set present day. They haven't done Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy version of keeping the setting. Updated it very much to, the sort of modern world of espionage, or released a depiction of the modern world of espionage. And obviously changed quite a lot of things in the process. This is obviously partly to turn it into a 10-hour-long episode drama rather than a short film. But yeah, I think a lot of the changes they made have actually, kind of made it work in this format of being 10-hour-long episodes. The Jackal has a much more developed character in this version. Yeah, he's got more sort of human emotions, where he is very much just, a mysterious man, gun for hire in the film. There's various other bits that are built out, such as there's a main subplot with the gunmaker character, who in the original film is just very much a guy who manufactures the kind of unusual weapon the Jackal uses. But there's a whole plot line involving him and his family in this. Again, all these characters are made a bit more complex, but some bits are sort of weirdly like exactly the same. So some bits they decided to create almost exactly, such as there's a scene in the film when the Jackal first gets the rifle he's going to use for his main assassination, and he goes into the forest and tests it out on a watermelon he's hung from a tree. And yeah, that scene is pretty much shot for shot recreated exactly in this TV show. So it's at least nodding towards the original, whilst also telling a story that you don't need any knowledge of the original film to enjoy. So you can just like dive in if you're just a fan of thrillers, as I am.
Yeah, this was on my list of 2024 things I might consider watching before the end of the year, but was ultimately beaten out by Baby Reindeer. It sounds like it might be alright though. Got Eddie Redmayne in it, doing one of these movie star does a TV show things that people do.
Yeah, exactly. And he is very good, as the Jackal again, picking up from Edward Fox, I think it was, back in the 1973 version. Yeah, he's a kind of warm, likeable performer, but he can also do kind of cold and scary as well. So yeah, you can believe that he's a sort of capable of murder. Yeah, they've got an excellent cast. Yeah, Natasha Lynch as the detective hunting the Jackal. She's very, very good. Again, character's a bit more developed in that she has like a home life and things like that as well. And you kind of see the effect of this pursuit on her marriage and her family. So that's pretty good. Yeah, and also Ursula Corbo, I'm not sure on the pronunciation of that. She's very good as well as one of the main supporting cast, and so is other people. Charles Dance crops up as well. There's a lot of good people doing good performances in this.
Okay, and it's based on a novel, isn't it? The film?
Yeah, it's based on a famous novel. Yeah.
So have they gone back to the novel to expand?
I think I've not read the novel, so it's a possibility they picked up some other things from the novel, although this is very much like an updated version for the 21st century. The novel itself is sort of loosely based on something that kind of happened. So yeah, there's a kind of real story behind this. The original novel and the film from 1973, the Jackal is hired to assassinate Charles de Gaulle. It's set slightly before it was made, when he returned as president of France to form the Fifth Republic and to hand Algeria back to the Algerians. This provoked outrage amongst especially sort of the hardcore military factions, and there was a breakaway group, I think, called the ONS, or something similar, or OAS maybe, who did make several attempts to assassinate Charles de Gaulle in retaliation for giving up Algeria. The plot of The Day of the Jackal is this group hire the Jackal in order to kill Charles de Gaulle. So yeah, there was a real group called the ONS who did try to kill Charles de Gaulle. The film, I think, opens with a genuine attempt when they tried to ambush his car and gun him down. So there is a kind of weird true story behind it, and obviously the original film features a real life, the target's a real life historical person, which creates a lot of tension because when you're watching it, you're thinking, well, he can't actually kill Charles de Gaulle because that never happened. But there's still an enormous amount of tension as basically the Jackal gets closer and closer to his target. They try to drop the net on him. He wriggles through, every trap he makes, every secret identity or disguise he has gets revealed, but he's got another one he can assume to get him closer to his target. And there's a lot of tension in that. They've gone with a different approach in this, which is that they have created a fictional character who's a sort of, slightly Mark Zuckerberg, maybe slightly Elon Musk-esque tech billionaire. Although also like kind of a good guy in that he's launched some new kind of tech platform, or is about to launch some kind of new kind of tech platform that will give radical transparency to the world's finances, and all the other billionaires will have all their dirty money laundered in public, all their dirty laundry laundered in public. So yeah, that's the group that's hired the Jackal to kill this tech billionaire before he can reveal all their financial secrets, which is a bit different because it doesn't have that element of killing a real person. I guess for copyright reasons, they're not going to have him kill or try to kill Donald Trump, Joe Biden, I guess the real Elon Musk, or...
the options are either have him kill like Elon Musk or something, or try to kill Elon Musk, or set it in the past and have him try to kill a historical figure.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And they clearly wanted to do like a modern take on it, was the idea. This classic story updated for the 21st century. Yeah, so they've changed that. I mean, it creates a different type of tension, which is that when it's a fictional character, obviously they can kill him off and it won't, create people going, hang on, that never happened. And the source of the hit is a fictional event, not an actual geopolitical event. So it creates a different style of tension. It's not, I guess, what The Day of the Jackal is known for, but it is still creating a new kind of tension. Maybe, I don't know, would it have been better if they made a show about a guy trying to kill Emmanuel Macron? Probably not. Because most Americans probably don't know who he is, and he didn't do anything as controversial as de Gaulle did. But it is interesting, and it is tense, and it is just a good thriller. If you're a fan of cat and mouse thrillers, your Killing Eves, things like that. Obviously, it doesn't have the sapphic dimension that Killing Eve had, but it does have a really good cat and mouse thriller aspect to it. So if you're a fan of that genre, then I would recommend this because, it does deliver the tension.
Yeah, no, it did look exciting. It did interest me a bit based on the trailers. I don't always go for the old Sky originals because I have a Sky account. They are constantly advertised to me, and they were on Now TV as well, to be fair. And I'd always come away thinking, well, that looks like a lower budgeted British version of a famous American show, and then I don't watch it. But this one did actually look alright. This and Sweet Pea did almost persuade me to actually watch a Sky original. It just hasn't yet happened.
Yeah, Sweet Pea looks good. But yeah, they do a lot of generic London-based crime shows and things like that, yeah. To be fair, so does the BBC.
Generic sort of thrillers. A lot of generic thrillers. There's one with Robert Carlyle playing the Prime Minister or something. I think it's called Cobra, which they advertise relentlessly and somehow never manages to appeal.
Yeah, they do a lot of things like this. You know, I guess they have their audience. They're going after it. Sort of a lot of dramas and stuff. I suppose picking up a lot of stuff that used to get made and maybe end up in the cinema, more kind of a thriller or a cop drama that we don't really get anymore. But yeah, a lot of them aren't that particularly interesting. What drew my attention to this was, Eddie Redmayne is a pretty big star. He's like, Hollywood successful. So it's got to be something to it that they've got him involved. And obviously, the fact they are, remaking a film that I know and really like was also the appeal of it. This actually had something to it. And also, it creates interesting discussion for the podcast as they go, how is this similar and different to that famous thing that already exists? I suppose, whereas something like Cobra, as far as I'm aware, it's not a remake or something, or an adaptation of something well known. So I guess it doesn't create that kind of compare and contrast that I enjoy.
Yeah, it's true, lads. This is how we run our lives. Will this be good to talk about on the podcast?
Yep. It's, it's a guiding light.
But yeah, I mean, for all my snottiness, I probably should support, a British company or, a British-based company starring British talents and making things mostly set in Britain, actually making these shows. I probably should actually occasionally support it instead of just relentlessly watching American stuff. But hey-ho, maybe I'll watch Sweet Pea in the new year to help them in some way. I hear it has got a second season, so at least it won't leave me hanging.
Yeah. So that's something to dive into. I mean, support these shows if they're good. No need to watch bad stuff. If you're not interested. Yeah.
It's been years of relentless advertising and I've not watched a single one. I assure you, there's no risk of that.
And although this is a Sky original with a British star, most of it isn't set in Britain. It does have that kind of slightly James Bond-esque international mad mystery thing going on. Like all great spy films and spy things, Mission Impossible, Bourne, part of the appeal is all the different interesting locations they go to. Yeah, there's a substantial bit early in the show that takes place in Munich. There are key scenes in Tallinn, in Spain, in France, obviously London as well, Northern Ireland. So it's got that kind of jet-setting aspect that you want from your kind of like high-level international spy thrillers or dramas. It's part of the genre, which is why it's doing it well. You've got interesting cat and mouse aspects, you've got different countries, you've got fake identities, you've got intrigue, you've got mysterious weapons being made. It's kind of ticking those thriller boxes. Maybe I wouldn't have watched it if I had known it was based on like solid source material, because it's not as fun as Mission Impossible, and it's not as revelatory as, say, the Bourne movies were, when they kind of took something that become quite staid, the sort of James Bond thing, and really shook it up and did something original. It's not really huge amounts of points for originality, but it is tense and enjoyable, so I would recommend it on that basis. But it's unlikely to trouble the top 5 shows of the year, because it is more of a standard but well-made thriller than something that's really doing something particularly interesting with the genre.
There you go. Just in case anyone was worried you'd be hearing about it again next week, don't worry, you apparently won't be.
I can recommend it, but if you don't watch loads of stuff and only zoom in on like the few really, really good things, then the next episode will have the kind of the creme de la creme of 2024 that you should focus on. But do watch this if you like thrillers, especially if you want something that's entertaining to, fill the time when you're off over Christmas, all those hours. There's 10 episodes of Day of the Jackal, and, each one has like a good twist ending that makes you go like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? So it works well as a thriller, I guess, as I keep saying.
So, next up, it's the second season of Arcane, or possibly Arcane : League of Legends. This is, of course, an animated series set in the world of League of Legends, centering around two sisters, Vi and Powder, who find themselves on opposite sides of the war between the rich city of Piltover and its seedy underbelly of Zorn over, class conflicts, the use of magic. And as the show goes on, we find ourselves meeting more and more people on both sides of this divide, as the two halves of the city find themselves increasingly at odds, until in this second season, inspired by a massive visible attack on the senior council of Piltover by Powder, now calling herself Jinx. This is the younger sister, who has become this sort of vaguely Harley Quinn-esque supervillain. She blows up the council, kills a bunch of people, and basically manages to ignite a full-on conflict between the two halves of the city. And now we see what happens next. This is, of course, not just the second season, but the final season. So, yep, it's all over now. Alistair, what did you think of this?
So this is an epic show with a capital E for epic. It's got amazing fantasy sequences. It's got a whole world, of for everything from design to political factions, culture, huge array of characters. So they're bringing the fantasy epic here. There's some absolutely amazing fight sequences and some, just really spectacular scenes to watch. It's got some very strong characterization. Quite a large cast of characters, most of which are pretty strongly developed and complex, especially the relationship between the two sisters, the core relationship that the show kind of pins on. That's complex, it's emotional, it's got lots of backs and forth in it. So overall, I really enjoyed this. I got a few criticisms that I will come to, but the main thing is that this is very ambitious. It's like a whole world they're trying to tell the story of. There's lots of complex ideas, different story elements, lots of characters, and I really liked how they managed to tie all this stuff together into something that, made a cohesive whole. I just really think they should be rewarded from the ambition of both the plotting, the world building, and the visual styles. So on that basis, I thought this was excellent.
I enjoyed this. As Alistair said, I liked the coherent and incredibly cool looking world. I liked the vast range of characters and the ambition of the plot. I obviously enjoyed the visual style. This is probably one of the first big, post-Spider-Verse amazing animations, really taking what they did in that and running with it in a slightly different direction, and it's really good. It's got a very music video vibe, I think, going on. There's a lot of big, cool, heavy, dramatic moments aggressively soundtracked by sort of pop rock songs. And it works really well. I did slightly feel that they could maybe have used the third season to end the plot in a way that didn't feel like it was slightly scrambling, especially towards the end. I do remember saying when we were covering season 1 that it felt like they had a lot of characters who hadn't been fully fleshed out beyond the core 3 or 4, but they could always get to that in season 2. But instead, by deciding to end in season 2, they've kind of had to rush to finish the plot anyway, and maybe not had enough time to fully get to all of those characters or fully develop those plots. I felt they could have used the third season to maybe make me care a bit more about characters outside the core sort of Vi, Jinx, Caitlyn axis. But nonetheless, it is definitely an impressive, ambitious show, and I guess I shouldn't complain too much about it being a bit overstuffed and therefore not boring, rather than yet another slow plodding show on Netflix.
Yeah, I agree with you that they would have been better with the third season in that there was a lot of plot to cannon through. It kind of feels like the fourth season of Babylon 5 when they tried to do, again, 2 seasons worth of plot in one, and they just go through things very, very quickly. This world is bigger and more complex, so it does mean there's a lot going on. So I think it would have been easier to follow had there been either more episodes in this season or another season, because things could have unfolded at a bit of an easier to follow place. And also I probably would have benefited from rewatching season 1. So I did watch a catch-up YouTube video, but I think a full rewatch of season 1, because some of the plotting is getting onto dark level complexity, and you kind of really need to be immersed in it. I guess on the other hand, it is quite light on exposition, which is I also did like in that the show treats you like a grown-up. It's not constantly restating what's going on and things like that, and moves quite quickly. So in that case, complicated, sometimes hard to follow, but at least treating you like a grown-up and not full of clunky exposition.
Yeah, I must admit, I only watched the recap video provided by Netflix, which came on before the season started, and wasn't very thorough. Didn't really give me a full recap of who many of the characters were, which left me a bit lost when we got into the plot. I think it took me most of the first chunk of 3 episodes, or at least most of the first 2 episodes, to fully get around all the characters and get a vague feeling of who everyone was. The show is very good at just making it clear who these characters are through action. They're very well defined. It's got a large cast of characters who have distinct motivations. I kind of wish they would have had more time again, but it does definitely feel like a lot of thought has gone into this.
Yeah, the characters are well developed. The ones we get development of, I really think the central dynamic between Jinx and Vi, or Powder and Vi, is really, really strong. They're and it keeps moving as well. They fall out, they try to kill each other, they team up at various points. Again, not going to drop spoilers right now, but you kind of, feel the strength of their connection, obviously, and also their, how they turn against each other. But I like the fact there's always interesting developments going off in different directions, which keeps it fresh. They don't kind of repeat themselves too much. There's always another development, or they don't they could have saved the big fight sequence between Jinx and Vi to the end of the season, which would have just been a big epic thing to build up to, and it would have created tension in that. But I feel like there would have also been a lot of, are we just spinning the wheel until we get to the end to have the big conflict? But instead they drop it in episode 3 of this 9 episode season. That's meaning they get to the kind of big bits quicker and then move past it and can keep moving the plot forwards and developing it to keep it interesting and to keep it tense.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've got this interesting structure where they drop the episodes 3 at a time in these sort of little arcs. So yeah, there's a big cliffhanger at the end of episode 3 and then again at the end of episode 6. And it does, as you say, keep this constant state of tension because you're not having to wait like 6 episodes or 12 episodes for the big dramatic peak. You know, there's always a big dramatic peak coming in the next multiple of 3. Yeah, I wouldn't have made you wait till the end of the season for the big Vi Powder fight. I'd have maybe considered having a season break between the second and third acts, to be honest. I feel like the last 3 episodes of the season could easily have been another season. But I don't know, I'm not the writers. They can do what they want.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they had planned a 3-arc season because, yeah, I don't know. It makes sense. 3 tranches of 3 episodes per season and then 3 seasons. I don't know if that seems to make more sense. And obviously 3-act structure, things like that. But that's just Netflix criminology. I mean, I am glad that they actually managed to finish this and wrap it up. And it is a Netflix show with like an ending. That in itself is pretty good. But yeah, the last 3 episodes do pack in a lot. Big, epic final confrontation and move things very, very quickly on a number of fronts, which is where it can be hard to follow.
I mean, I think a lot of the appeal of the first season was, well, partly the amazing visuals, which are still amazing here.
Yeah.
I do occasionally feel that some of the fight sequences, like the one you mentioned in episode 3, do almost go so far towards being a music video, but they don't actually have as much impact as they could. But that might just be me being snotty about superhero fights. But yeah, it does look amazing, and it is still one of probably the premier animations of our time.
Yeah. And absolutely, you're right to say, yeah, picking up from Spider-Verse in that, yeah, that very, very vivid, almost like quite lurid art style that's a bit graffiti inspired, looks very cool, like it kind of doesn't look like kind of a fake CGI type thing. It looks very impressive. Yeah, there's real beautiful animation throughout this whole show. And yeah, and I like how they use like different animation styles. Like there's one for like, I guess, corporeal reality, and then there's a different styles used for like dream sequences or when they go into magical bits, or there's like a time travel bit that varies up the art style as well. So there's always an interesting visual clue that this isn't real or this is a different timeline or a different universe when it gets deep into the magic and the sort of complex bits of the plot. But also it means they really have their ability to experiment with lots of different styles and how things look and different colour schemes, things like that, which is just means it's always like beautiful to look at.
Yeah, some good use of music as well, and the world in general comes across as quite developed and quite interesting. Like, I can believe they'll now maybe go on to make another show called something else, League of Legends, set in the same world, which, to be honest, is a more interesting approach to me than just milking these exact characters and this exact story forever. Even if I would rather have had another season of this, I do think that having this world set up like this and having quite a strong sense of it does give you potential to do other things in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, yeah, League of Legends is a huge property and there's a big complex world. So yeah, I gather from what I've seen online that, like, you know, there's whole other geographies of the world and other places with different politics and history and things like that. They just focus in on this one city, and even that's complex enough to make it feel like a real city. Well, the 2 cities are sort of on top of each other. But yeah, it's just amazing design, like a sort of steampunk, slightly diesel punk, deco punk, kind of different technologies mixed together, bits of magic thrown in. Feels again like a real place, even though it's also a fantasy place. It feels as complex and real. And I do like the kind of punk style to it. They're bringing the punk into steampunk in like between the fashion, the hair, the dyes, things like that. There's the soundtrack and things like that. I mean, there's bits of soft rock and emo and things like that on the soundtrack, I guess, because it is aimed at teenagers. There's one bit in the second season when an episode opens with an extended bare knuckle boxing montage, and yeah, over that there's a great punk song, I can't remember which one specifically, plays over the top. Linkin Park's advanced single of their new album that I discussed in the last podcast episode. Yeah, The Emptiness Machine, that's on the soundtrack, I believe. There's other bits and pieces. So yeah, they're bringing that like alt style and alt culture to steampunk, which I enjoyed very much.
Yeah, and I think the fact they've focused very clearly in on these specific characters has made it work as a sort of video game adaptation as well. Like, you know, they could have just made a series or a film called League of Legends and tried to do the entire world, and it would probably have been quite vague and probably wouldn't have been as successful. You know, I think, of course, of the World of Warcraft movie, a gem from the early days of the podcast.
Yep.
But yeah, by focusing in on these characters and making it a character story, it becomes very sort of big and emotional. The thing Arcane is primarily good at, apart from the visuals, is these huge melodramatic, like, emotional character beats, where you have these moments where these characters dramatically scream and thrash and turn evil and, to a pounding rock song, declare their hatred or their anger or whatever. It's very, as you say, it's very aimed at teenagers in a lot of ways, but if you can pull off that level of raw emotion, then it will, as this show has, become very successful.
Yeah, I think a lot of video game adaptations get hung up on either trying to transpose the world of the video game into this new format because, yeah, people love the whole world and they love exploring the world to try and put it all in, or they get hung up on like a mechanic that people really like the way something works, like how magic's done or, you know, how combat happens. And they've pushed this stuff to the background to focus on character, which is good. And that's why I think people really like it. People really identify with these characters. You know, my Twitter feed and, well, primarily my Instagram feed, when this was on and when the first season was on, was just been dominated by fan art of the characters, especially Jinx. This is a character that's really resonated with people, expanded out beyond just people who like League of Legends into just people who kind of like cool, badass female characters with punk style or whatever. People are really, enjoying that aspect of it. And they really like grasp these characters. I think, you know, partly because they're, as we said, they're well developed. There's a kind of queer side to them in that there's quite a few queer romances. The main characters, Vi and Kate, have a sort of, a queer romance, which is, probably the main interpersonal love arc conflict of the show. There's also Kate and Maddie, one of the supporting characters, has like they have a queer romance as well. It's set in a world where there's no sexism apparently in this world. Like, you know, there's sort of women in the military and it's never really commented on or made a thing. There seems to be no homophobia. There is conflict between nations, between classes, between people of different places. So it does have those elements, just not those conflicts. So I think a lot of people, again, people online who are geeky but also a bit alternative and also, you know, either queer or interested in queer culture also sees this as something that they feel really expresses them, be it a bit punk, a bit alt, a bit queer, a bit feminist. It kind of appeals to a lot of people in that way. And especially if you're really interested in that kind of nexus of culture, then it really strongly appeals to you. But yeah, again, that's one of the reasons why I like it. I'm not a queer woman, obviously, but I do find those characters interesting and I do like the style of this show a lot. So that's one of the reasons why I really liked it.
Well, yeah, it's a combination of having distinct characters and actually having an aesthetic. It makes it feel distinct and unique, even if it is a branded product possibly designed to make you go and play League of Legends, which I'm not going to do. But nonetheless, I did enjoy the show. I possibly enjoyed season 1 slightly more. I think it felt slightly more focused and slightly more the right level of plotted, but this was a decent conclusion. I was entertained. I was not bored.
Yeah, they expanded out a lot in this season, whereas the first one really benefited from the tight focus on the core characters. I guess they wanted to fill in the whole world. They addressed the conflict between topside and underside, the two cities. You know, there's lots of political conflict, which again, what makes the show good is the politics seems real. It seems like this is a world that could exist. It's deep enough and complex enough that it's believable, and there's lots of political conflict. So I can see why they went out in the season and kind of made this like bigger tapestry. As you say, maybe the first season was stronger for having that bit more in the background and just really focusing on the character relationships.
Yeah, maybe.
But overall, there was a lot of expectation around this show because the first one was not only well received, but also a bit of a sleeper hit. I guess, you know, maybe we should realise that's something based on the huge property of League of Legends. Not surprised that it turned out to be a hit, but I think people didn't really expect this to be as good as it was when it first came around. And the problem with having a sleeper hit that everyone goes like, wow, that was amazing, is that the expectations are quite high for when you do your second part, especially also your concluding part. But I felt they lived up to expectations and I was pleased. So yeah, that's something to be proud about.
And lastly today, it's Blitz. This is a new film written, produced and directed by Steve McQueen about a mother played by Saoirse Ronan and her son Elliot Heffernan, who are separated by evacuation during the Blitz in World War II, only for her son George to leap off the train and try and find his way back to his mother. And then the film is a story of their journey to be reunited against a backdrop of obviously war, suffering and bombs falling. We have both seen this film on Apple TV. Alistair, what did you think of it?
So I thought it was good at capturing the Blitz, which although has been depicted before in film and TV, not for a while and not so much focusing on straight up like people's experience of the Blitz, the ordinary people on the home front. I thought it was good at capturing what that experience was like, the horror, the fear, the destruction that was just like wreaked on London, you know, it's really terrible. And it was good at creating the tension for that and getting that across, mainly because you see it kind of all through a child's eyes, which makes it feel scarier and more intense, which is something that Steve McQueen's very good at catching. I also liked how basically this was specifically a film about race and the Blitz, bringing things like the jazz scene, people from the Commonwealth being in Britain, like there's a Nigerian air raid warden in one section of the film. It's very open to think about race in Britain in the 40s, in that there's a lot of people who are quite racist. There are also some people who aren't, and it seems like a sort of nuanced handling of the history of race in this country. So on that basis, an interesting film, and quite dark, tense ones. So yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed this. Probably not the sort of film I'd normally watch that many of, but I think it does do a good job of evoking the period. I think it does create a good sense of, the tension, the horror, the genuine confusion and chaos of living in London as the Nazis bomb the shit out of it. I personally kept sort of yearning for slightly more, I don't know, tension, excitement. My pulse very rarely accelerated much beyond, okay, cool, during this film, and I kept waiting for myself to be more excited or more emotional. But it's decently made, it's decently produced. There's a slightly silly bit where the kid falls in with a Fagin-esque criminal, which is slightly strange. I don't know, I did watch Mark Cabot's review in which he commented that he thinks this seems like kind of a film aimed at kids, basically, or at least like 12-year-olds or something, like younger people, to try and give them an understanding of what the Blitz was like. And I think that's possibly accurate, and I think that may be one reason why it didn't necessarily ring as true for me. Well, not ring as true. I'm sure everything that happens here is broadly true. That's why it didn't do it for me as much.
Yeah, I can see what you mean about it being maybe aimed at younger people. It's definitely dialing down Steve McQueen's signature style of quite dark alienation, very intense emotions, and some quite grim violence. Yeah, and I guess to make it more maybe accessible to a younger audience, or possibly more accessible to a mainstream audience as well. I mean, we're a long way from films like Hunger with Shame, things like that, but there is still his distinctive style in this. This is probably his most mainstream and accessible film. Hopefully it'll be a gateway for people. Apple put a lot of money into making this a big deal. It might win lots of awards next year. So hopefully it'll be a gateway drug for people into the weirder, darker, earlier stuff. But I think his signature style does work well for capturing the Blitz, because he's good at creating things that can be quite intense and scary, things like that, and conveying intense emotions. So that does work for the Blitz, which was nothing if not an intense experience for the people who went through it.
Well, yeah, especially when you get to some of the actual blitzing sequences where people are hiding out in tube stations or underground shelters and stuff. There's this real sense of like communal terror, which rings quite true, and I think goes at least very slightly against the vague sense you maybe get from the culture that it was this time of great warmth and pulling together. And there's something to be said for reminding us that it maybe wasn't that fun, but without going too far into full-on misery porn. I don't know. Like, there's one bit which takes place in a bombed-out building with some corpses scattered around, and it's probably about the most, 12A rated version of that you can imagine. There's some corpses, but they're very bloodless.
Yeah, well, that's a depiction of a real event that happened, which was the bombing of, I think it was called the Paris Cafe, a famous jazz cafe in London, when a bomb fell, I think, down a chimney. Because they were in a basement, and everyone was killed by a pressure wave, which preserved everyone's corpses, but killed everyone through the shock. So, yeah, that's a real historical event. The scene building up to that is one of the sort of more signature Steve McQueen moments of the film that's kind of dark and intense and a little bit weird. The bit where you just get the kind of jazz scene, which it also relates to the whole point the film's trying to make about, because of London's jazz scene, there were, black people in London, before the Windrush, during the Second World War, and he's trying to put that history on screen, and he's done a lot of research. I've read interviews with Steve McQueen, he's talked about the extent of all the research he's done to put in real things, and yeah, I mean, if you've read the novel by Ben Aranovich, The Moon Over Soho, that also features the Café Paris jazz scene, as a historical event in that, so it's a real thing, and it's quite dark, but yeah, I suppose it does work in that sort of 12A style, as they said, but I guess it's accomplishing many things in that it's kind of bringing in Steve McQueen's signature style, it's bringing in the history of black people in London in the 1930s and 40s, it's weaving in actual historical events, which the film also does. For example, like the campaign for people to use the underground as bomb shelters. They weren't allowed to use them at first, the underground, and this is set during that period when people are protesting, and various bits like people buying tickets and riding the tube all day, you're not getting off, just so they can use them as a shelter. So yeah, it's bringing in those historical things and historical periods, including, and obviously evacuation of the children, which is something that happened that's kind of one of the main points of the film. So it's bringing in that history in that way.
Yeah, and it's bringing those things in a way that isn't too preachy or patronising. It's, especially if you view this as a film maybe aimed at a younger or possibly family audience, maybe, is that the term? I think it's talking about it in a way that is approachable and, making clear that these problems exist or that things happen without it getting too, again, incredibly grim. There's like a few moments of overt racism and one full-on racist attack scene, but otherwise it's quite, it talks about it without reveling in it too much.
Yeah, I mean, from reading the interviews with Steve McQueen, he was a lot more angry about the history of race in this country than the film was itself. From reading interviews with him, I got a sense that maybe this would be an angrier film, but I guess it's not fair to judge a film by its press coverage rather than the film itself. It is an interesting depiction of race. I mean, the racist attack scene, I think one of the scariest things about it is that when some white yobs are attacking a black man, the other people of colour kind of just sort of stand by and don't get involved because they're frightened, which is kind of, the kind of silence of the crowd is kind of the scariest aspect of it. I mean, that's a very Steve McQueen thing, finding that quiet terror in moments like that. But yeah, as you're right, there's only one scene and there's some very warm depictions of people. There's a scene with a sort of underground left-wing sort of movement that's bringing together like people of colour, Jews, poor white people in the East End to try and help them through the Blitz. So yeah, and that's kind of a very positive story that it's trying to spin. But that was a good bit as well.
Well, yeah, like the ultimate message by the end, I think, of a lot of it is people are ultimately good and people are banding together to try and do the right thing, and it's just a few people being arseholes, which, is a more positive message than you can sometimes hear nowadays, about how society is fundamentally broken and there is a dark heart inside all of us.
Yeah, it's a more optimistic film, and in some ways it's a more optimistic film than previous Steve McQueen films, like, especially I'm thinking of a film like Shame, which is about just, how we're all suffering deep down inside, or Hunger, which is about someone slowly dying and what sort of person it takes to starve yourself to death. So in some ways this is probably one of his more optimistic films.
Yeah, I think ultimately, even though it's not, a relentless happiness from beginning to end, it does come across as quite a soaring historical epic in which normal people struggle through and survive, which is, basically presented as a good thing.
Yeah, and I feel this is a film very much that's in dialogue with the Blitz and how it's perceived in contemporary culture. I know that sounds like a quite pretentious thing to say, but then Steve McQueen did begin life as a sort of visual installation artist, so it's the sort of stuff people say about his work. I feel there's like two aspects of what this film's to say about the Blitz, and they're kind of commentaries on how today, considering there's almost no one alive who remembers the Blitz, and if they were quite young children, so it's become more of a mythologized thing, and it does capture the Blitz spirit, a phrase you see politicians echoing, when they want to do anything from austerity to Brexit. We need some Blitz spirit. And it does show that, that was real. There were people coming together through tough times, supporting each other, helping other people who'd lost their homes, people who'd lost their families, doing all they can to help people through that sense of solidarity and community. Absolutely, yeah, the film does show that and shows it's real. But also, I feel the film depicts what I would call like anti-Blitz spirit, which is showing that it wasn't all like that. There are lots of characters in this film who are cruel and selfish, especially there's lots of people being cruel to children, which again, it was the 40s. People were not nice to children. As you mentioned, the Stephen Graham Fagin-esque character, an interesting character, but showing, there were people who were just selfish during the Blitz and, stole from dead bodies, stole from destroyed homes, looted, took advantage of the chaos to enrich themselves. So in some ways it's saying, yes, the Blitz spirit is real, but also it's saying there was this other side to it. It wasn't all strawberry cake and, people pulling together and stiff British upper lip and keep calm and carry on. There was a darker side to it.
Well, yeah, I think that's the fundamental message at the end, isn't it? It's more complicated than that, which he's managed to do without just making a diatribe.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Which is impressive, and Saoirse Ronan's very good. She's definitely, the big emotional core of a lot of this.
Yeah, she does a great performance. I mean, she's excellent in everything. It's good to see her, hopefully, get some more Oscar nods and maybe even win this time. I mean, she was great in The Outrun this year. So, in the last few months, she's done 2 excellent performances. Always excited to see what she does next. Yeah, the kid, Elliot Heffernan, does really good. Sometimes child actors can be a bit annoying, but he was good. Bizarrely, and I didn't notice the end credits, Paul Weller from The Jam was in this, playing George's grandfather. I thought he was good, but it's just bizarre casting. I've not seen Paul Weller do a lot of acting before.
Yeah, the guy playing Ife, the character who he meets in the middle, was played by Benjamin Clementine, who I spent the entire bit thinking, where do I know you from? Once I looked up his name, I realised that I knew him because he's the lead vocalist on a Gorillaz single called Hallelujah Money, which I quite like, and I'd seen him in the music video. So there we go. Musicians acting all over the place. Yeah,
no, he's good. Obviously, there's a stock of great British character actors because it's a British period drama. We've got Kathy Burke turning up, Stephen Graham we've mentioned. They're good, again, they always do excellent performances. I also really enjoyed Erin Kellyman. She's great, really great young talent. We've seen her in things such as Solo, a Star Wars story, and Falcon and Winter Soldier. So she's always interested, talented person. Unfortunately, been in some high-profile geek stuff that has not been very good. But isn't good, but that's not her fault. She was also in that amazing sitcom Raised by Wolves that I thought was brilliant, and Channel 4 thought otherwise because they didn't make any more of it. Another great talent, good to see her here. Some famous faces because it is a British period drama.
Oh yeah, again, another bit of British media being made by an American streaming company. I've heard that might be one of the themes of the year, actually. We may come back to that in next week's roundup.
Yeah. I mean, feel World War II is interesting, commercially successful worldwide. British World War II stories. I mean, yeah, Gary Oldman doing Churchill a few years ago. Huge hit. He won an Oscar, made lots of money in America. Americans like plucky British wartime underdog stories, and this is very much one. Maybe it's one made for the 2020s when we were more interested in race and racial history. I'm sure there's some people that are angry about this story. The less said about that, the better.
I can confirm I watched that Mark Commode review, then scrolled down to the comments and saw those people.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But Steve McQueen's a great director. He's made an interesting film, and I think it will be, again, it should be one of his most successful, most mainstream films. It's on Apple Films. It's going out to a big audience. They obviously see this as an award season thing. They've got a high-profile director, a high-profile star. They've got a emotional topic that's likely to win, sort of Oscar-y material, isn't it? World War II, sad story about a child. And on that basis, it works. And I wouldn't mind if this walked away with a lot of prizes. We'll see what else it's up against. Or maybe this will be another silence, and I say this is going to be all over the Oscars, and it isn't.
I still thought that although it was very well made, and I think it did say the things it was trying to say, the film itself was a nice rousing adventure that never quite took off. So I don't know if I see it winning a pile of Oscars, but I guess we'll wait and see.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with your criticisms, but this is the sort of thing the Academy likes. It rarely gives the Oscars to the best film of the year, more to the most Oscar-y film of the year.
It is very Oscar-y. It will be interesting to see if it wins any Oscars for being Oscar-y. I don't know if there is an official Oscars category for being the most Oscar-y yet.
It's only a matter of time.
The Oscar for Oscar-y goes to...
Oscar, the film.
Yeah. It does just sound like a film about a dog.
Yeah.
But I cannot deny it is well made, and it does have some things to say. And I think, again, as a film maybe aimed at younger people to talk a bit about this sort of stuff, I think it definitely has a lot of merit. So well done.
That's all we have time for today. Thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe in your podcatcher of choice and leave us a review. You can get more from us on our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can listen to past episodes of the podcast, bonus audio clips, and read short written pieces by Nick and myself. Keep an eye on the website, as in the next few weeks, Nick will be posting his top 10 TV shows of the year, and I'll be posting my summary of the year in film.
And follow us on social media, as we'll probably post there as well to tell you when you can read those scintillating articles. And yes, after you've done that, follow me on social media at Nick Bryan on Blue Sky and NickMB on Twitter, although are we still using that? Who knows? NickBryan.com on Instagram, NickBryan.com on the general internet. In fact, I'm just everywhere.
And if you want any more from me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram or Blue Sky by searching for Alistair Ball. You can also find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com and find my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com. You can also join us here next time for our annual Year in Review episode, where we will be counting down our favourite films and TV shows of 2024 and choosing our least favourite. What will come top? What will come bottom? Join us next time to find out. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.